Good morning, everybody. So thank you, guys. First of all, I also want to reiterate and thank our sponsors. Thank you guys for sponsoring this event. Really appreciate it. I think what our intent has been is to obviously make this timely with what's going on in the federal contracting world and in federal procurement in general and the set-aside programs. So we really appreciate our sponsors. I want to thank all the attendees for being here. Right, taking time. I know you guys are super busy. I know you are trying to manage the marketplace, so appreciate you guys being here, participating, and participating in the matchmaking as well. I know, and by the way, the other thing I just wanted to do is, can we have our team, first of all, I really want to thank John Cook for being such a strong part of putting this together and the Tribal Edge and the Tribal Summit. Thank you, sir. Do we have the rest of our team? Can you guys just raise your hand? Because this is not easy to do. There's Barbara over there. There's Michelle right there. These guys have been working tirelessly to put this together. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. So I think what I want to do as far as comments, and I know we're getting a little bit of feedback. What I want to do, I'm going to put down my coffee. What I want to do as far as comments, a couple of things. One is I want to try to keep it today. Participation, right, from the audience at a maximum, right? Because I think you guys are here and you probably have questions. The other thing that I want to try to do is minimize, like, introduction of people, because we have the app, we have the handouts, so you kind of know who's what and what their background is. The intent is really to share information with you guys and allow you guys to ask questions and gain from participating here. So I won't go too deeply into my background. It's in the handouts and on the app. What I'd like to really share, though, is the intent of today is, there's a lot going on, right? And it can be viewed as doom and gloom because we hear it, but it can also be viewed as every change has opportunities, right? So how do we identify those opportunities and take advantage of them? I think sort of from our perspective, and look, I ran the federal small business set-aside programs for a period of 7 years, right? And we are closely tied to our clients. We're closely tied to the SBA and the administration and the Hill, et cetera. And I think from our perspective, what we almost see, and you guys probably hear, and it's funny because it reminded me of a show my wife had me watch one time. You guys might know this, and I might be getting this title wrong. It's Little Fires Everywhere. I don't know if you know that show. But it's kind of like that, right? We have little fires everywhere. You have these executive orders, right? So what do they exactly mean? They seem to be challenging the set-aside programs. They seem to be challenging, quote unquote, DEI and woke. Is 8A DEI? Is women-owned DEI? Is that woke? They seem to be challenging some of your work at agencies, and I don't know, maybe a lot of you have gotten sort of the justification of your contracts or T for Cs. So we'll be talking about how to react to those and what are your rights and how do you protect your contracts. So I think that's important. We have memos, right, that are centralizing acquisition at the GSA. What does that mean? Like, that seems like it might not be too small business friendly because, from my days at the SBA, and this is funny because Joe and I used to discuss this because Joe used to have my job and then he went to the White House and did much bigger and greater things. But, buying efficiently is great, but how does it protect small business, right? And then these vehicles are good, but how do you participate if it's a limited access vehicle and it's closed for 5 years? And so if we see centralization of the GSA, how do we protect the programs? What do we do to protect the programs? And how do we position ourselves to be able to take advantage of the current environment? And so the way I look at it and the way I think you might want to look at it is it's almost like reading tea leaves, right? That's what I tell our team. Like, we track the EOs every day, right? And quite frankly, they come out every day. And then you forget, wait a second, which one am I supposed to be mad at? because there's 3 more that I'm concerned about. And I'm not sure, are they actually doing that, or did they just say they were going to do that? And how are they going to actually implement it? And you know, we'll have panels on the Federal Acquisition Regulations rewrite, right? And I know Joe will talk about that. What does that mean? Because presumably stuff that's not in statute might not make it into the FAR. So what's not in statute, and are we concerned? So those are sort of the things that it's like reading tea leaves and connecting the dots. And you know, people keep asking me like, well, when is things going to settle down? Like when are we going to know? And there are some deadlines around the new federal acquisition regulations. But from my perspective, I think we'll talk about this in some panels, I think you've seen sort of the first 100 days. You've seen DOGE. A lot of you have seen the impact of that on your own contracts. And ultimately, at least from my perspective, you know, things will change. The federal government will buy differently. They will try to buy more efficiently. But ultimately, it's not all doom and gloom because the federal government has to buy stuff. Like, they're not going to go away from buying stuff, right? They're going to buy stuff. Are they going to buy it differently? Are they going to try and buy it more efficiently? Is the way they interact with vendors going to change? Are they going to be really price competitive environments? Probably. But that doesn't mean that you can't create a strategy to be successful, okay? And then the one thing that I'd sort of focus on is if we look at the environment and we see things sort of stabilizing, let's say in the next 6 months, what are the things that at least we're telling our clients? From my perspective, it's a time where we need to all work together, right? Small businesses, tribally owned entities, service-disabled firms, women-owned, HUBZone, right? It's a time to really figure out, and I think that's why, you know, this event in making sure that it's reflective of the current environment is really talking about the challenges, but creating opportunities for partnering and teaming. So I hope that many of you will participate in matchmaking. What we sort of tell clients is, look, identify potential partners and consider doing joint ventures, right? Because one of the things that we hear is that, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is that there is going to be a focus on service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses. There is going to be a focus on the veteran community. So it's an opportunity to figure out, who do I team up with? And you guys are probably aware of this. You can always do a small-to-small joint venture and do it 2 ways. One way, you're the managing member. The other way, the SDVO is the managing member. And depending on sort of what the flavor of the day is, you have a marketing opportunity with your buyers in the federal government. So even though, quote unquote, you have these little fires everywhere, and it's an environment where you have to be able to read the tea leaves and adjust, I think in this environment, you're going to see efficiencies, you're going to see price competition, but it's an environment where teaming can be successful. The other thing that I would actually say as far as the current landscape, it's a really important time. And look, from before I was at the SBA, I actually managed and operated a small GovCon firm that my dad started back in the 80s. And I know that it's difficult to sort of stay on top of everything, right? Because we're going to talk about a lot of EOs, a lot of regulations, and all of those things. Because you're worried about your backlog, you're worried about your pipeline, you're worried about your payroll, you're worried about your cash flow. How do I keep track of all this? But it's important, one, to be fully aware of, you know, what do the changes mean? How do I strategize and not be reactive, but be proactive in responding to the market dynamics? That's one. So being aware of those changes and how does that change your interaction with the federal government. The other thing that I'd say is that now is the time also to really be engaged with your buyer, right? What we've been seeing is a lot of options not being exercised, right? So you want to have a discussion with your CO, your COTAR, your program office, like what's the acquisition strategy moving forward? Is this option going to be exercised? Is there a challenge to this contract? Because here's the other thing that's happening in the marketplace. And Where's Michelle? Michelle, please tell me to stop talking. Or Jake. Okay, tell me to stop. Okay. Here's a mic up. Here's the other thing that's happening in the marketplace. I shouldn't say a lot. Contracts have to be justified, right? I was going to say a lot of contracts, but contracts have to be justified. Solicitations and requirements have to be justified. So some of our clients are getting the call for help and support from their buyer in justifying the contract. In other words, hey, I have to send this justification, help me write it. Others don't even know that that's happening, right? So if you're having that dialogue with your CO, it helps you prepare them to do their job to protect their requirements, right? So it's a team effort. And then I guess the other thing I'll just throw out there, because this has sort of been out in the community and sort of on the social media and the talking boards, et cetera, is sort of the cutbacks in the federal marketplace. In the federal workforce. And what does that mean, and how do we feel about it, and what's the impact? A lot of folks that supported the small business programs are being cut. And so what's two things. One is, what's the impact of that? Two is, what is our role as marketplace participants, as advocates, as those who have worked with these small business specialists over the year? It pained me. I saw something on I think it was LinkedIn, and it really pained me because it was about one of the agencies riffing all their small business specialists but one. And someone had said, this is horrible. These guys support our community and they're disappearing. How is this going to impact us? And I saw a lot of sort of pushback from the small business community. Like, these guys are useless. They've never done anything for me. Never answer my phone call, not very helpful. And that sort of pained me because I've been on the inside of government, right? Yes, can we have more efficient government? Absolutely, we can. Do we have probably the best government in the world? Absolutely, yes, we do. And have these small business specialists been working their tail off to get requirements set aside? Yes, they have. Their job isn't to get you a contract. Their job isn't to do your BD and your proposal writing. Their job is happening behind closed doors. Every day of the week, they're sticking their neck out on the line to get requirements set aside or to get sole source set aside. In an environment where they're usually getting beat up by senior procurement executives in programs where they're like, we don't want to go small business, that's ridiculous. We want to go with, not that I have, I don't want to give a big name, but we just want to go with a big name, right? And even those firms are being challenged in this current environment, and I think Joe will talk a little bit about that. But I think it's important as these, so here's what happens. As these offices get reduced and further reduced, we're going to see is potentially fewer set-asides. So it becomes our job to really advocate for set-asides. A lot of times firms like yours don't work through the acquisition planning process. And you'll talk to contracting officers and they'll be like, oh, no, I can't talk to you. It's not true. They can work with the community in the acquisition planning process. It's when the solicitation comes out that they presumably can't talk to you, right? So planning acquisition, working with the buying activity, advocating for set-asides, that's something that this community can do. That's something that we can do with the buying activity, with the contracting officials, with the program officials, with the agency. You can even do it through congressionals, right? And your congressional delegation. So it's really important as we see this workforce decline. One is preserving some infrastructure around small business and the small business programs so that it can be rebuilt. The other is supporting this community as we are out in the community, supporting the small business community because we're the eyes and ears and we can engage. And we have the ability to engage, either directly or through congressional support or through our procurement center representatives, if you're aware of what those are. So all of that to say, yes, there are challenges. Yes, it's important to keep up with everything that's happening. It's really difficult to do that, we understand. And by the way, I don't know if Trevor is here. Where's Trevor? Trevor and his team, and you have it in your bags. Keep a update of all the executive orders and all the memos and what at least we think they mean to the programs and why we think they might be challenging or not. So there are resources out there, and I'm not just trying to sell ours, there's other resources too. But it's difficult to keep up with that. It's important to do that though. And then it's important to sort of figure out what the strategy is and be proactive. I think that's important. And then ultimately, if I have a message, is to team up. Take this opportunity to identify how to team up, how to leverage partnerships for growth and reacting to the marketplace. Teaming, from my perspective, is going to create an environment for success. Because no matter what the flavor of the day is, you can have a tool in your toolkit. Is that the right idiom? You can have a tool in your toolkit, tool belt, to react to the current marketplace. Let me stop right there. I know I'm probably short on time. I can go. Any questions from the audience? I know today's packed with experts. I'll be up a couple times with panel members. There'll be breakout sessions. But any questions, guys, from anybody? No? Oh, we got one. Feel free, there is, oh, and then we got one up here too, Jay. No.
I don't know if I really need this, but...
No, go ahead, because they can't hear you in the back.
Yeah, fine.
Oh. It's wanting to feed back over here.
Sorry. That's kind of...
What I've been finding, especially with DODs, is that we're being restrained from talking directly to the directorates and the IPTs that know about the issues. And they're, this last week, you need to go through our supply resource management, or you need to go through Air Force right now for some reason is working with a group called SASPO. Any SASPO people in here? No? Good. They suck. And these are, administrative types.
Yeah.
I met a nice, lovely young lady this morning in the elevator. She was with finance. And that'd be like putting her in charge of the parts. She probably is a wizard at finance, but she didn't know what OEM meant. She didn't know what obsolescence was.
Yeah.
And that's what's running into these supply resource managers, these SASPO people, all of them. They can't tell you a darn thing about the parts, so they just, it's difficult to try to work with them. Do you have a way of working with that? Getting around this administrative logjam?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a challenging environment. That's part of the challenging environment that we're working in, right? So when you talk about, and I think the industry you're talking about is sort of the resellers and integrators and OEMs, and how the federal government buys that, right? Is that sort of what you're referring to? And the federal government understanding their needs and then setting aside requirements for small businesses as opposed to figuring out how to go directly to the OEMs. And I think what you're describing is administrative people who don't understand how it all works together, but their focus is cost saving. Is that sort of what you're saying? Maybe. I think, so here's the challenge. First of all, there is no doubt that there's fewer and fewer people in the federal government, and Joe will talk about this, to get to. There's just fewer people. So, and they're looking to automate acquisition. So things are changing. Like, things aren't going to happen like they usually did. Like, if you could pick up the phone and talk to someone, that person might not be there anymore. So the idea is, how do you adapt? In all honesty, I don't know that I have that answer for you today, right? It's changing. It's going to change. I think that the other challenge that you point to, though, is we work with a lot of integrators, resellers, value-add resellers, IT value-add resellers, and that world is changing. Because there's a perception that those guys don't add a whole lot, right? They just mark it up and sell it to the government. And that's the farthest, from my perspective, and I ran these programs, that's the farthest thing from the truth, right? 2 minutes? That's the farthest thing from the truth, right? Because value-add resellers work with all sorts of OEMs, right? And put together a solution for the government. The government, Doge team, doesn't always understand that. They're like, oh yeah, we're the government. We can go directly to the OEM. We don't need you guys. Well, and you know what? If they don't negotiate with us, we'll just walk, because that's how we negotiate. So it's a lot of education. Like, there's a lot of education necessary with the current teams that are coming in that don't necessarily understand the federal procurement process. Now, here's the flip side of that. Can they make it more efficient? Maybe. We're all taxpayers, right? We all want it to be more efficient. We all want it to be cost savings. However, there's a lot of education that needs to occur on the new teams that don't quite understand how this works and the value that small businesses bring to federal procurement. And by the way, there's an externality to that. And they might not want to hear it, but it's not just that you bring value as a small business. It's not just that you bring integration and you save the federal government money, right? By increasing competition, by expanding the industrial base, by expanding the federal supply sector. It's also, and this is the part that sometimes they don't want to hear, it also benefits the communities, right? It also benefits the underserved communities. It also benefits the tribal communities. So there's a lot of externalities to the small business set-aside programs. However, I'm getting off. However, the one thing that I would focus on is when I walk in the door, I'm not saying, hey, I'm a small business and you're going to impact the underserved community by giving me a contract. I wouldn't start off with that, right? I would start off with, hey, you want to increase competition, industrial base, supply chain, made in America? I'm your person, right? That's what I would start off with. And I think that's sort of the message today. And then teaming. How do I team to be competitive in the current marketplace? I'll stop there. I know there's a panel coming up. I think I'm moderating it, but we'll go from there. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.